Hello and welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly. The Security Weekly team is taking the week off this week, and we're sharing some executive interviews we recorded at Black Hat 2025. For episode 423, we'll be sharing 7 of these interviews with you today. The first, in segment 1, Doug White sits down with Theresa Lanowitz, Chief Evangelist at LevelBlue, for a timely conversation about one of cybersecurity's most pressing threats, the software supply chain. Then Yuval Wollman, president of CyberProof, unpacks how AI agents are not only expanding the attack surface, but reshaping the entire cyber threat landscape. Next, in segment 2, Doug White and Mickey Bresman, CEO of Sempris, dive into a conversation on the evolution of ransomware and the alarming rise of cyber extortion tactics. Then Matt Alderman sits down with JJ Guy, CEO and co-founder of Sevco Security, to unpack the disconnect between asset inventory, vulnerability visibility, and true cyber risk understanding. Finally, in segment 3, for our last 3 videos, we start with Doug White, who sits down with Intel 471 CEO Jason Passwaters for a conversation on how cybercrime has evolved into a professional, profit-driven ecosystem. Then the one and only H.D. Moore, CEO and co-founder of RunZero, discusses why vulnerability management is still failing enterprises and what needs to change. I'm particularly interested in checking that one out. And Jackie McGuire sits down with Jawahar Sivasankaran, president at Cyware, for a deep dive into the future of cyber threat intelligence, agentic AI, and open source security innovation. I hope you enjoy watching these executive interviews as much as we did making them. We'll see you next week.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Legacy tools flood you with alerts. NodeZero shows you what's actually exploitable. Horizon 3 AI's offensive security platform autonomously identifies attack paths, validates findings with real proof, and helps teams prioritize remediation based on true impact. No agents, no guesswork, no disruption. Just production-safe testing that mirrors how adversaries move in the real world. Stay ahead of credential abuse, privilege escalation, and lateral movement. Learn how NodeZero changes the game at securityweekly.com/Horizon3. You can't protect what you can't see. Everyone knows that, right? That's why RunZero gives you total visibility across your internal and external attack surfaces. Worried about unknown and unmanageable devices? They've got those covered too. RunZero also helps you illuminate all types of exposures, even the elusive ones. They go beyond CVEs to tackle the hard stuff, even 0 days. No agents, no authentication, just crazy deep data about your assets and exposures that focuses on the risks that actually matter. Not an endless sea of CVEs. Go try it for free and start seeing results in minutes. Visit securityweekly.com/RunZero to get started.
Oh, it's Black Hat 2025 in sunny Las Vegas, where, when you look at the thermometer, you think it's actually your blood pressure and heart rate or something, but, we're here. And we're recording live from the CyberRisk TV studios in the beautiful and air-conditioned Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. I'm not telling you which floor, but I am your host, Doug White. And joining me for this interview is Theresa Lanowitz, the Chief Evangelist, a title I've always wanted to hold, at LevelBlue. Hi, Theresa.
Hi, Doug. It's great to be here with you in balmy Las Vegas.
Balmy, even, yeah.
Balmy,
As they said, it was cooler today. My Uber driver yesterday was like, "Oh, it's not so bad today." I was like, "Oh," it was like 68 degrees at my house.
Scorched,
and,
yes.
Yeah, I walk out of the airport, and it was like when I used to be a consultant in Houston, and I would fly down there from New York and just be like, "Oh, what is this? Why does anyone live here?" But well, I was really excited to see you on here because I love to talk about supply chain. I've been terrified about supply chain for a long time. A lot longer than it was a term. I mean, I'd never heard a term for it until recently. Like, maybe tell us a little bit about how you define supply chain.
Absolutely. And I'm with LevelBlue. And what we did at LevelBlue recently is we conducted research, 1,500 cybersecurity professionals, C-level, C-level -1, -2, across 16 different countries and 7 different industry verticals. And we were able to discern some really great information about the software supply chain. And if you look at the software supply chain, the way we define it is all of the tools, the processes, the libraries, the code that goes into building, publishing, and creating that software artifact.
So I guess what started getting me scared about this was the minute that I sat down and I used someone else's code. So I mean, this is way back now. So this is like way back. And I had a job. I was responsible for lots of code, and I'm very mine. But I couldn't do it all.
Right.
I mean, there was just no way. And I had to farm some of it out. And I said, "Can you write this module for me, John?" And John said, "Sure." Now, it wasn't good.
And John was a human being, right?
No, John was
Okay.
absolutely a human being. But back then, that was all sci-fi stuff.
Yeah.
John was a literal, walking, breathing human being, at least as far as I know. And the code wasn't great. And I was like, and I had to redo a lot of it. And if I had just stuck it into, now we had a good process. It was a bank, so we had a good process for making sure bad things didn't get into print. But today, I find myself more and more just, I need something, it's sitting right there in PyPy. I'm like, Numpy, my friend, and not to run down our NumPy, different people argue about my pronunciation of Numpy, but Numpy sounds so cool. I mean, you obviously see that in your studies, like how much of this stuff is going on.
Right. And there are 3 big things that are really driving the software supply chain right now. Because you mentioned that several years ago, it was a term that we really didn't have in the industry, and it's become quite popular over the past couple of years. And there are really 3 things that are driving that. First thing is, it is in the zeitgeist of 2025. The second thing is that we're really in the API economy. And the third thing, and this is what you're alluding to, is software acquisition. So if we take a look at the zeitgeist of 2025, we see large mega companies inside the United States writing to their software suppliers in open letters saying, hey, we want security over features and functionality. It's okay if we go a little bit slower because we want security first. And then you take a look at the second thing of living in that API economy, where the API is really the communications glue that allows applications, devices, businesses, companies, different industries to really connect and talk to one another. And that expands the attack surface, certainly. And then the third thing is really the software acquisition. Where are we getting our software from? And we're getting our software today from a variety of places. We're getting it internally developed, that you developed and then John developed, which wasn't very good in your assessment. So internally developed. We have commercial off-the-shelf software. We have open source repositories, which 20 years ago we would have never thought, we can go out to an open source repository and get pretty much anything we want. And then the big thing that we're seeing today is AI generated code. So our software supply chain is just expanding, the attack surface is expanding, and it is now firmly in the zeitgeist of 2025. And, we've seen a lot of software supply chain attacks over the past several months as well. And so that's really, really kind of sounding the alarm for organizations to say, I really need to take a look at where my software is coming from and what it is that I'm building.
And I see how that AI driven and AI LLM generated stuff is so addictive, because even in my own work, it's like I went from no, never, I will not do this, I will not touch this stuff, I don't trust it, never, to, well, maybe just for this thing. Or maybe just to test, and then, I can get this module to work. And the next thing you know, you're like, ChatGPT, like, write that code, I'll be over here and having a beer, and that scares me, because I notice what the LLMs tell me. Like, they almost always start with, be sure this module's installed, and be sure that module's installed, and we start plugging those modules in. And I'm worried about that dependency chain, which is really the supply chain. How do we manage that? I mean, where does that go? Because I always took on my show about Augustus de Morgan, who said big fleas have little fleas upon their backs to bite them. And I see that with these modules. It's like, I installed this module. That module got 5 modules to install. Those 5 modules have 7 modules to install. And the next thing you know, I've got hundreds of modules. I have no idea where they came from, and I'm terrified. What do we do about it?
Yeah, you're bringing up the really interesting component of writing AI generated code. You're actually checking it from a human being's perspective, right? I mean, you're going in there, you're applying your years of software development knowledge, and you're saying, this module isn't so great. This module is passable. Oh, this defect is now inserted in here. So what we're seeing is a lot of AI generated code is being put into open source repositories. They're being put in there with oftentimes empty packages. A software developer could then come around, say, oh yes, that sounds exactly like the package that I might need, take it, and it's empty inside because they're not applying that human element to it. So in the software supply chain, there's always that human element. You always have to be able to go back and check and verify, because if you're just relying upon AI generated code, you can get a lot of defects. You can get bloated code. And this is something that a lot of the people in the performance engineering community are talking about right now is, all of this source code is just so big and so bloated that we're seeing performance really take a hit because of this, because we don't have people who are going through there with that knowledge saying, oh, let's take a look at this and let's see what's going on here.
Is that what you call supply chain visibility? I mean, is that the term, or have I got that kind of off?
That's part of it, right? So the software supply chain visibility is understanding where is your software coming from, what tools are you using, what libraries are you using, what components are you using, and that supply chain visibility is really linked to breaches. And in our research, what we found is that people with low visibility, so 80% of organizations with low visibility in their software supply chain, meaning they don't really understand where the software is coming from, they're not working with their third-party suppliers to understand what their security practices are. 80% of people with low visibility had a breach in the past 12 months. Now, if we contrast that with 6% of the organizations who told us they have high visibility and they had a breach, that's a big, big difference. And you also take a look at that, and then you start to say, well, if I have high visibility into my software supply chain, I understand where the software is coming from, I understand the security practices of my suppliers that I'm bringing in here. I may be working with a trusted third-party supplier that I've been working with for decades, and they do really great code reviews. Now, I'm going to do my own code review, of course, to make sure that what they're doing is fitting with my security practices. So understanding the security practices of your third-party suppliers. That also says that you can be more innovative, and it gives you less risk in looking at things such as maybe unsupported software, understanding third-party supply chain, understanding open source code that you might be bringing from a repository, and so on. So that gives you far more confidence in order to really innovate.
So it's almost like a certified like SBOM kind of thing that you really need to have. I mean, I would kind of, if you were telling me right now, like you and I were talking before we recorded about one of my classes, I don't care. That sounds bad. I don't care about this environment because it's a total test laboratory environment for a student playground. I'm not concerned. Vulnerability is good. Nobody can get to it except the students. So I like that. But if I was trying to push this code, I would be absolutely terrified, because I was looking at it and I'm like, libraries piled on top of libraries on top of libraries. Even if I had the SBOM, I don't know that it would help me. It's like reading the back of a box of cereal and going, what's in this? And there's words you can't pronounce. And you're going, should I eat this or not? And, you kind of have to just leave it there.
Well, in that SBOM, the software bill of materials, having that inventory, that cargo list, if you will, codified list of everything that's in that piece of software and where it came from, if there is some type of vulnerability that is exploited, you should then be able to really go back and say, oh, I got this from this open source repository. Oh, my third-party supplier that I've been working with for decades wrote that. Or that's a library that's been inside of our organization for 25 years, and I just pulled it up.
Well, this is I promise this is the gotcha question. It's not, but I want to ask it. I just thought of it. When you were talking about the correlation between the visibility and so on, I wonder how vibe coding stuff is affecting that, because vibe coding, if you're not familiar with the term, means that instead of a developer, you have somebody who just says, hey, ChatGPT, we need a UI for the ATM machine. Make it purple, maybe. I mean, do you think that could have a big impact there?
Huge impact, absolutely huge impact. And this idea of vibe coding, a lot of people are using it. And as you mentioned, if you're going into production with some of this software, you better understand what your SBOM is. You better understand what your vulnerabilities are. If you're working with third-party suppliers, you should know their security practices. So this idea of vibe coding, what it does is it allows a lot of organizations to just go and say, hey, write me, a module that does X, Y, Z. And I'm going to put it in my favorite open source repository with this really attractive name. And maybe it's empty. Maybe the vibe code said, well, I kind of can't do that work for you. Maybe you should be doing that work on your own. So, but you then go ahead and publish it to that open source repository because you didn't really check. You thought, well, I vibe coded it, everything's fine with it. Then the next person comes along, takes it because it's an attractive name, says, yes, this is something that I would definitely use. And it could be empty. It may be empty. The developer might not be checking. Then what you get to is slop squatting with just a bunch of empty modules all over the place, leading to more vulnerabilities that can be exported, leading to ways in for an adversary and so on. So this idea of vibe coding, while there are some really good ideas that can come from it, you really, again, have to bring in that human element. And that's a big, big part of the software supply chain.
So that does almost make me think that it shifts a lot of this focus up into what in my day was called systems analyst, because I was a systems analyst, and so part of my job was to review other people's code. So somebody sends me a module, I say, dude, this isn't going to work. You've really screwed this up or whatever. So you think that is going to be a big growing sector? Is this sort of, I don't know what to call it, QA systems, and you may know what to call it, is a QA systems analyst kind of role?
I was a big person in the QA world for a long, long time as well. I was an analyst with Gartner, software quality assurance, big area. And one of the things we've gotten away from probably in the past 2 decades is this idea of good, solid software engineering, where you really have all the stakeholders. You're bringing in the business analyst who may have gone off and gathered requirements, the functional requirements, the non-functional requirements. Functional requirements meaning how the software actually works, but the non-functional requirements, let's look at things such as performance and security. And for a long, long time, the industry really ignored those non-functional requirements. Now this idea of vibe coding is bringing back this idea of saying, hey, we have to have good software engineering, good software engineering practices. It's not about let's just put something out because we can. And that goes back to one of the things I talked about earlier with the whole idea of the software supply chain is it's really within the zeitgeist of 2025. You have major corporations calling for security over features, security over speed to market. So I think that we're going to get back to that because we see some of the flaws that some of these newer types of coding are introducing. That's not saying that we're not going to see these types of things become more popular in the future, but we have to go back to basics to understand from a software engineering perspective what we're doing.
Yeah, I had a person named Marion. Hi, Marion. I don't know if Marion's still around, but that would not let you commit. Marion was not a coder. She didn't know anything about code, but she knew about signatures on forms.
Yep.
And unless all those people had signed and approved and all the tests had been done, she was not going to allow this to commit to prod. And I think we need to get back to that. We got into this world of just spaghetti coding, pseudocoding, whatever, and now it's vibe coding or whatever. What is it, the ultimate, though? What should we do? What do we need to do? Is it open source? Is it visibility? Is it SBOMs? All the above?
All the above. It's visibility into your software supply chain and visibility with the software suppliers that you're working with. So whether you are bringing code in from open source repositories, trusted third-party advisors that you've worked with for decades, AI-generated code, commercial off-the-shelf software, you have to understand the security practices, the security procedures that they're using within the side of their own organization. And also going back to that idea of good software engineering practices, good software engineering hygiene, that's a big, big part of it. And you take a look at some of these other things that adversaries are doing right now, living off the land attacks. They know where the vulnerabilities are inside of source code, whether it be open source code, whether it be commercial off-the-shelf software, code that you've written. They know where the vulnerabilities are. They can just use those to get into your system.
Why wouldn't you?
Right. It's easier, right?
It's all real scary to me. But thank you, Theresa Lanowitz, for joining us today. If you want to find out more about LevelBlue, please visit securityweekly.com/LevelBlueBH. For all Black Hat 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/blackhat. Thanks again, Theresa. And we will be here all week, and we'll have some more stuff after the break for you. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Doug. It was great to be here.
Yay. Welcome to Black Hat 2025. We are here. We're recording live. So this is live. So when I screw it all up, well, you know how that goes. It's the Cyber Risk TV studio in Mandalay Bay in sunny Las Vegas. I'm your host, Doug White, and joining me for this interview is Yuval Wollman, the president of CyberProof. Hi, welcome.
Hi, good to be here, Doug. Thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome that you could be here because I want you to tell me a little bit more about CyberProof, because this was a company that, I mean, obviously I looked it up and so forth, but I wasn't as familiar with the name when I first saw the interview schedule. So could you tell everybody about it?
Sure. CyberProof is a part of a broader group called UST. At CyberProof, we provide managed detection and response services to the enterprise market. Okay. Now, to work with enterprise customers, you need to provide them with a broader exposure management perspective. What does it mean? If I am a security leader at an enterprise, I have so many tools. I have so many alerts coming out of that. Risks, vendors, third-party vendors and risks. What do I do with all that noise? How do I cope with it? What is my real exposure? What is my real risk? And we at CyberProof help you to understand what is your security posture, what is your full exposure. And to do that properly, you need to follow the threats. There's so much noise, so many bad people, we're going to talk about them. But only a few one are relevant to you, to your industry, to your vertical, to your company, to your brand, to your team. So how exactly can I identify who they are? What do they want from me? What kind of capabilities do they have? Where are they? This is what we're dealing with at CyberProof.
Yeah, when I first went to university, I got a job working at the computer center, and I walked in on the first day, and they said, one of your jobs is here's the logs. And they were all printed. So they were printed on green bar, and the stack was about that high. And I said, what am I supposed to do with all that? And he said, well, you review it and sign off that there's no threats. And I said, what? How am I supposed to do that? So, I mean, I think today we have that same problem, only in even vaster quantities.
More virtual world, yes.
Because you have so many different threats. And that threat surface expanded from when I was there, which was the 36 workstations, to now the entire world and the planet. So I know you guys were doing some studies and reports and things like that. Yeah. So like who are these biggest threat groups that are coming after pretty much everybody at this point?
I'm going to answer that, but you said something that I want to start with, very interesting, about the attack surface, that it has expanded dramatically.
Yep.
And everyone, we are close to the Black Hat conference, and everyone in the market is talking about the Gen AI revolution, and specifically now about Agentic AI. If you think about those agents, they are providing you with more attack surface effectively. Because now, we always used to say that, in an organization, in an enterprise, the weakest link is the most important link. And usually it is a human. But now an agent can be that link, that weak link. Because you can manipulate the agent, you can prompt, various malicious asks for that agent to act in the wrong way, as opposed to the original intention of the employee that operated that agent. Or you can manipulate the data that the agent uses. So effectively, this huge change that we're seeing is actually making things more risky. And this is where we need to, we always talk about how agents are being used by the hackers, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But think about that from a different way, from the defensive side. They are creating further risk.
Yep. I mean, they absolutely do, because I always tell people that humans are the biggest threat. I mean, I've been saying that since 1986, because one of the very first sort of pen tests, when it wasn't called that, kind of campaigns I ran, was calling a place I worked, and we were just literally calling employees out of the phone book from off-site, so their phone double rang, so they knew it was coming, and trying to get them to give up credentials. And we succeeded almost 80% of the time in the first round. But today, because I have agents, I can try to trick those, I think, probably more predictable human-esque kind of creatures than the humans even were, because humans can behave erratically, but agents are going to follow a plan. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that threat surface just went through the roof when we started introducing these things. But those can also be defenders, right?
Correct. So you can use the agents to impersonate and to do the phishing campaign that you guys have done in the late 1980s and further. But I think that the AI-powered approach that you just mentioned for hackers is one of the biggest trends that is taking place in 2025, and moving forward it will only increase. And the term MTTE, mean time to exfiltrate data, it has dropped dramatically from 9 days to 2 days. And I want to talk specifically about an interesting group called Funksec. What's unique about Funksec, that they have taken those agents and LLM tools to lower the barrier of entry to the hacker's world. It's much easier now to create the code, to impersonate, to run a phishing campaign, to build a ransomware, where it's much easier. And you can even think about that from an economic perspective. You can build a platform, a marketplace for hackers to come and buy it.
Of course.
So Funksec specifically, they've built FunkBid, but you can find many other organizations such as Dragonforce. What they've done, Dragonforce, they have built a shop. And we provide you all the tools, and you just need to take your own brand, and you are a new hacker group out there in the market. As opposed to 2 years ago, you had like a marketplace, you have a pool of talents. If you want to build a group, you are reaching out to the CFO, to the CTO, to the analyst, to the CEO. You build a group and you go out and make some money. Now it's much easier because of those tools that you mentioned.
Yeah, and they have really good customer service. I was
true.
exploring some of these things. There was ransomware-as-a-service tools and other as-a-service tools, and I was really shocked at the customer service quality. It was a lot better than... I'll not name this airline. It was a lot better than an airline. You can fill in whichever one you hate the most here. But I really saw that, and they've turned it into an industry.
Yes.
That it almost looks like a legitimate industry at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does. It's not even like organized crime or something. It's just like straight up above boards. Like, here we are. We do this. We sell this service.
It's actually the third largest economy in the world today. The cyber capital that you can make out of it.
And that makes it an even bigger threat, right? Because, I mean, now they have the third largest economy in the world. They have every bit of interest in targeting and showing they can accomplish these things because they want to get new customers.
Yep.
And so you really have to market that. That's pretty scary.
Yeah, and you can also, you're talking about professionalizing, do that vertically, meaning build a group that is focused now only on retail.
Right.
For example, Scattered Spider, who attacked the UK retail group. It's in the report that you mentioned earlier, right? Earlier in this year, Harrods and Marks and Spencer's and Co-op, they just were focused on the UK. And think about the impact. It's not only the economic impact, but also the social media impact and the press that you're getting. So the money, the profit you can gain out of it is much bigger. And of course, there are some other motivations where it comes to geopolitics. We'll talk about that. But I think from an economic perspective, the motivation and the incentives are huge.
Yeah, and I mean, I think they have a lot. So the idea of counting coup is a sort of term, that's a hackery term that's, I guess, really old-fashioned wordage, but it's really something. And I always remember I worked at a bank once, and they had this huge edifice that they didn't need. They had all these marble steps and everything. And I asked somebody once, why do we spend all the money on this? And they said it's about perception.
Yeah.
People want to know their money is safe, so you need to build something safe. So I think targeting industries, you don't want to be that company that gets picked out, like say a casino. If people didn't trust that the casino was being honest, the casino is going to suffer a lot.
Yeah.
So those like Scattered Spider really likes to do that, and I like to focus on specific things. Correct. But I did want to talk to you a little bit about the sort of fallout from these wars and things as well, because what I've seen is these nation states, have always fought wars. I mean, this has been going on since the dawn of time. But as these nation states do battle with various and sundry people, do you think there's a lot of like collateral damage spillover from these things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the cyber dimension of geopolitical conflicts, if sometimes it's being used when you do not want to engage in physical war.
Of course, yeah.
And sometimes you embed it within the physical war layers. And we've seen that in Ukraine and Russia 3.5 years ago. We are seeing that constantly between Israel and Iran. But even if you take, for example, a very short conflict, hopefully it will keep being short, between Pakistan and India. Just 3 months ago, the hostilities took place, I think, net 4 days. Very short. Aggressive, but short. You saw a rise of about 600 attacks between those two countries within that period of time. You saw new 45 groups coming in, stepping and attacking each other. But what was also interesting to see is how criminals started to identify themselves with a nation state goals. Because you saw a Pakistani group called Site Copy. They attacked Indian government agencies, education system, railroads. They didn't ransomware to get money from an Indian bank necessarily. They went all in. So are they nation state backed or not? Or if you take, for example, a North Korean group that is using, so it's not a government backed, but it's using government tools, Moonstone Slick, they call themselves. So are they nation state or not? So the identity here, the lines are not as clear as we thought it is. And because everything now is converged into a brute force trend where you have those, we spoke about Iran and Israel, we spoke about Pakistan and India, we spoke about Russia and Ukraine, you have the South China Sea conflict, and you have a few other tacit tensions between Russia and the entire European continent, right? So we will see those convergence more and more tighten in the next few months, in the next few years, and the attacks will be even more brutal with the new tools that we just mentioned.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that threat surface expands downward from that nation state. So if you have a very large nation state, like say China, and they have developed secret toolkits, that nobody knows about these things. They may have hundreds of exploits that they're not going to reveal because they're a nation state. I mean, they're not just some 12-year-old hacker. They're a nation state. They hold these things dearly. And then this kinetic war starts, or even just a political war starts, a tariff war, I don't know, and you unleash a bunch of these exploits. That could just trickle all the way down through nation state affiliates. So these are just people you say, yeah, sure, we'd love for you to do something, to hacktivists, who are people that say, I'm on your side, to fake hacktivists, which are people that just use this as an opportunity to exploit somebody, on down through people going, wow, there's a good exploit. I'm going to use that on people that haven't patched up, because they're basically saying, this doesn't concern me. It's, it's Oceania attacking Grand Fenwick. It's not my concern, because I saw that a lot with the Ukraine. So, I mean, do you see this just continuing to expand? I mean, at what point, what do we do?
I think it grows probably exponentially. There is a very good question of how can you deter? If we keep ourselves in the geopolitical layer, can you make effective deterrence? Because you mentioned the nation state crown jewels that they want to use and deploy. So we've seen that deterrence in place. Earlier, through the Russian-Ukrainian war, we saw how the U.S. administration posed a threat public threat. It was one of the chiefs at the White House, and it probably had an impact on the Kremlin. They backed off from some of their attacks because the U.S. publicly said, which is very, very rare, will go after you, after your infrastructure. And we have the capabilities. So as long as you can frame it within political context, there are political tools to handle that. But you said it right. It goes way deeper to economic incentive, the third largest economy, as we said. You have business models, you had marketplace, you have cartels now that provide you with the tools, but they want to own the knowledge. So I think that we're heading to a world that is more chaotic. And if I am a government agency or an enterprise or a smaller company, I need to carefully think about what do I do not to be the weakest link in the industry. How do I protect myself? How do I get the exposure management perspective that I mentioned earlier? So these are the actions that effectively we need to take as security leaders in our day-to-day. So many things to do, but we must be optimistic, because if you make a few steps right and use the right solution, not necessarily the right tool, but the right state of mind and framework, you can be very well protected and mainly decrease the risk. You will never be fully protected.
No. I mean,
but it's about how
possible.
can you lower the risk and make sure that you are, reasonably protected to face exfiltration of data and any kind other.
Because my stack of green bar now would fill a couple of warehouses a day in terms of all the pings and threats and alerts and everything that would pop up on those kind of reports. So obviously the threat surface has expanded to some almost infinite place. Yeah. We all have to be very, I think we all have to be very, very, very cautious, especially with all these things going on as we see this stuff leaking out into the future. Thank you, Yuval Wollman, for joining us today. And if you want to find out more about CyberProof, please visit securityweekly.com/cyberproofbh for Black Hat. And for all our Black Hat 2025 coverage from Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/Black Hat. Thanks again, Yuval.
Thank you for having me, Doug.
Yeah.
Ransomware, supply chain attacks, 0 days. Cyber threats don't wait, and neither should your defenses. With ThreatLocker, you're not just reacting to threats, you're stopping them before they start. Our Zero Trust endpoint protection locks down your environment with pinpoint control over what's allowed to run and what's not. No guesswork, no blind spots. Just proactive, built-for-now security that keeps your business moving. Want to see how a true default deny strategy works? Head over to securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker and take the first step towards shutting the door on threats before they even knock. Security Weekly and Cyber Risk TV are headed back to one of the biggest identity security events of the year, Octane 2025, put on by Okta. Live September 24th through 26th from the vibrant city of Las Vegas, Octane 2025 brings together the best minds in identity, security, and technology innovation. And this year, we're turning up the volume. Security Weekly will be on site in full force with Mandy Logan and myself, Adrian Sanabria, leading the charge. Get ready for live-streamed executive interviews, exclusive on-site editorial coverage from SC Media, and brand new this year, a live-streamed episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. It's your chance to engage with identity leaders, dive into the future of AI security, and hang out with your favorite Security Weekly hosts. And here's the best part. Security Weekly listeners get an exclusive discount. Just head to securityweekly.com/Octane, register, and use promo code OKTNSCMA25 to get your conference pass for $200.
Live. When they tell you live, that's a different effect. I'm telling you right now. Welcome to Black Hat 2025. We're here, Cyber Risk TV, recording live from the Cyber Risk TV studio. That's what they call it. But it's at Mandalay Bay. I'm not telling you which floor. In Las Vegas. I'm Doug White, and joining me for this interview is Mickey Bressman, the CEO at Cimpress. They started letting me talk to CEOs occasionally. Welcome, Mickey. How are you?
Great to be here.
Yeah, cool. So I guess the sort of driving force behind this interview was about Cimpress and this report about ransomware. And I'm always interested in ransomware because I always thought it was like the most obvious evolution of hacking. You know, I mean, I came from the old days where people were like, "Ooh, I managed to get in your system," you know, kind of stuff. And I guess none of us were ever smart enough to get super rich by thinking, you know, I could make these guys pay me. I mean, really, and it was when I first started seeing ransomware, I was so shocked. So you want to just give us a little background on what's going on in ransomware right now?
Sure. So first of all, to your comment, we have this saying that we adopted over the years that hacker is not a bad word. And the reason that we're saying is because not everyone who is breaking into things is necessarily a criminal,
agree.
and we should make the distinction between the two. Just because
I always say attackers, actually.
Yeah,
usually, when I'm talking about the old days, I usually say hackers because that was what everybody just sort of referred to, people that were working in these kind of things. And then, in the modern age, I almost never say hackers because I don't like that. I don't like that. I agree with you. Attackers is a better word.
Yeah. Oh, bad actors, because
actors.
That's kind of what. But anyway, going back, things definitely evolved, right? If you remember the years of when we had just viruses and things like that, that was a very different game. What's interesting to me is that actually ransomware is also evolved, and some of it we actually showed in the report that even to me at least was an eye opener. What I'm saying that things have evolved. If you think about ransomware evolution, the initial stage was I get into your data, I encrypt it, and now I'm asking for money in order to release it. Yeah. The next step of that evolution was basically I steal your data, I encrypt your data, and now I have two ways to basically ask for money. One hand, I might publish it, so you probably want to pay me to avoid the publication.
Yes.
And the other one is you want me to help you to decrypt it back. And I think now we're seeing like the third evolution of that, where in my mind, the way to think about it, and that's going back to the criminal type of an approach, is that it's been proven that industry makes a lot of money. And when that happens, you see way more of an organized crime. And because of that, we see a lot of different things that are starting to happen because it's not, a script kiddo sitting somewhere in the basement. Right. It's really well organized now. So one of the things that we saw is that this blend between the virtual and the physical world starting to happen, where this story that I shared about a CISO that I had the chat with, where when they were going through their ransomware event, what happened with them is that one of the IT guys got a picture of his daughter playing in the park. So somebody actually had to take that picture, send to him, and it basically said, you should not show up to work today. And this is even before he knew what's happening. But imagine, I was just thinking about myself. I have kids as well. So my thinking was, if I were to get that type of an email, what would be my response? And it's also from experience, it's always easy to think about those. We're sitting in this nice room in the Mandalay Bay, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
We're not going to say which floor, but it's very different once you get it and it's like hits you in reality. And I think that's one of the evolutions that we're seeing because of the business that ransomware have become. We're seeing this progression of way more organized crime and what it actually means when you really have heavy hitters, a lot of money coming in. How does that affect the whole industry?
But that I completely agree with what you said. I mean, about this has become like an industry, but that doesn't exclude all the dinky people either, because it's so easy to get into this, either through ransomware-as-a-service operations where the organized crime types are selling you crime, which is kind of a new idea. I guess I never thought about that in terms of physical crime. But then it's still today even easier, I think, for script kiddies to just go out and buy a framework or a toolkit pre-built. And I know they'll even sell you one for specific industries, and you can even buy access to specific networks.
So the whole organization or the way that it works now is way more sophisticated. What I mean by that is that you have specific players for different stages of the attack. You'll have somebody that will create the encryption. You have somebody else that will make sure that they get the initial hold of the environment. And then you have the third person or third company that would come in and actually do the actual deed. What's more interesting from our perspective is that, sometimes how do you know like who you are dealing with? If on the negotiation stage they're asking for something which is way smaller than what you would expect, then you know that they don't even know what was encrypted. They just know that they encrypted something. That might be the same, non-sophisticated attacker that just got a tool and used it. Which, by the way, also interesting, because I would argue that in many cases today, you don't even have to have technical skill set. You simply have somebody else that does the whole software for you, somebody else you're paying to get the access. So you're only kind of negotiating the ransom, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, I would think now, I was just thinking about this, you could probably even have people that are just faking it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, when it was encryption, you could see. So if somebody encrypts my drive, I go, oh, the drive's encrypted. And I've responded to those where people said, do you know what's going on here? Our machine won't boot, and you're like, oh yeah, your drive's encrypted. But you could almost, with this exfiltration stuff, just call people and say, we have your data. Because I did a case like that.
Yep.
There was no data, but this person was extorting money who said he had video data. And somebody obviously been doing something they shouldn't have done.
That reminds me a lot the Nigerian prince emails that we all very used to. But
the classic.
Yeah, I agree with you. But if you send enough of those, then somebody probably going to reply and give you some money. But I think for going back to the organizations and the larger companies out there, that's not going to work because they will all ask for some proof. They will want to know who they're dealing with.
I mean, we've evolved beyond that.
But then also, like, going back to the fact that it's all criminals that we're dealing with, this idea that you can pay and they will actually get rid of your data, they will not publish it. We saw it falls apart several times. Like, we even seen situation, without mentioning the specific, although it was all publicly in the news, but this healthcare provider that got encrypted, paid the money, also paid for the data not to be leaked. And then it turned out that there was another associate, because the cyber criminals now it's really organized crime. And one of them was not paid as much as they were expecting. So now all of a sudden you paid this side, but that side is saying, no, you actually need to pay me as well.
Well, so, yeah, I mean, when I've had clients call me, and I'm usually somebody they call when they don't have a lot of money and resources. They call me and say, I was in your class, I heard you speak or something, could you just give me some advice? My advice has always been what the FBI said, which is don't pay them, because that's always been the advice in almost all extortion scams since the dawn of time is don't pay them because they're criminals. You pay them, they either turn around and say, okay, you can pay me some more. Oh, you want this back? Yeah. Or they just take your money and run, or maybe, who knows. But what's your advice?
Yeah, so generally speaking, I say the exact same thing as you just said. I always remind people that when you pay ransom, it's not going to go for anything, like a good cause.
Well, yeah,
it's going to go, and by the way, you don't know where it's going, right? So it might be the case that it's going for some foreign government, that is actually going to buy weapons, and it might be used against, exactly. And then in other cases, it's just criminals, which is also not an amazing thing. And to your point as well, we've seen multiple times that people paid and then they got the wrong decryption keys and the data got leaked in any case. So that's not the best thing to do. With that said, seeing some of the situations that what actually happened, I can understand why in some cases people do decide to try and pay, because mainly they feel that they don't have any other option. What I'm always kind of thinking about is the healthcare industry. Why I'm always thinking about, and there is plenty of, we can talk about the water management and many others that have huge impact on our lives. Right. But in healthcare, you basically get it like an immediate impact. I have patients. The patients potentially will not be able to get the type of treatment that they need, which might lead to loss of life. Yep. So if you are in that type of a situation and you don't have, a response plan, and you don't have the tools to basically bounce back, and maybe you don't have a backup, which sounds really weird in this day of age, but it still happens. If you don't have the backup, if you didn't try the recovery, if you don't have a plan, if you don't have, out-of-band communication, all of that stuff, you're left with very little options.
Well, I mean, I used to do disaster planning for people. So this was like, and one of the very first things that we would do is I show up, your CIO or whomever it is that's being tested comes out, and I said, okay, this morning the building fell down. You just showed up, the building fell down. What's your first move? And I was always shocked when they said, oh, I'll call Steve. And I went, call him. And they went, oh, Dan, do you have Steve's number? I need to call. And they're like, Steve retired. He's not here anymore. And I'm like, okay, Steve's not here. And if they said they were going to call Steve, I go, Steve was in the building. Now who do you call? Because I wanted them to have a response plan. And I'm always shocked that plenty of people don't have a response plan. So listen, all of you, you should have a response plan right now. Just like at this moment, assume that Mickey and I just ransomwared you. What's your first move? Like right now, what are you doing? Because everything is locked up and we have your data. So, I mean, I think you and I are pretty much on the same page with that.
So the only thing that I will add is that we do run tabletops for customers, and I sometimes see customers run those without us, where they just invite us to watch what they're doing so we can provide some advice after the fact. You always should assume exactly what you did. You always should assume, let's say that Steve is the decision maker. And let's say that he's the only one that can say that we can start the recovery process. But let's assume for a minute that Steve is right now diving in the Bahamas. And we can't get a hold of him. At what point in time do we decide that we should call Bill now? Or at what point in time can somebody else make the decision that, no, we should actually be doing that? When you start, like, my main point is that when you do a tabletop exercise, which is a very well practiced PowerPoint, and everything is, oh, we're going to do this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, it looks amazing.
Of course.
Unless you have somebody in the room that says, you're out, and keep going. So now let's see what the actual recovery plan looks like.
No, I learned this from an exercise. I was doing an exercise with the state police one time, and it was a national level exercise. And literally, I walked in on the second day of the exercise, and the person walked up to me and they said, the sergeant was killed in a traffic accident this morning. I was like, what? And he was like, oh, I'm supposed to say exercise around that. I was like, oh my God, you're in charge now. And it was like literally one of the most stressful days of my entire life, because don't kid yourself, I guess, is very what I've seen is people say, I call Steve says everything's fine and runs a backup cycle and we're done. Are we finished here? And I'm like, not even close.
Yeah.
Because you have to test it. I mean, you have to actually test it. And it's like restoring backups is another one. But backups won't save you now. Now, you did say there was a decrease in the amount of ransoms, too, that was going on.
A slight one. So I'm very happy that there is some decrease. But I also want to be realistic. This is a report that compares data to about a year ago. The decrease is not huge.
Okay.
And I will not be surprised if in a year from now we're back to increase. I mean, it's not always the exact same number.
Yeah, there's always, this is part of your response plan too. There is this should we pay? I mean, it's kind of the settle versus go to court argument, because sometimes even if you're right, settling is the cheaper option. I mean, that sounds kind of cynical, but it's very true.
That's the reality, right? But I think when it comes to the actual response, some things maybe just to leave people with something to think about. You definitely want to make sure that you have your cyber insurance involved. And you want to make sure that you know how to engage them in the case that you actually have something happening, because you will need it. You want to make sure that your legal team gets engaged. And especially the biggest advice that maybe is have an external counsel that is what their job. Get involved, because otherwise you will be in a world of pain after the fact. Especially if you're a publicly trading company or in one of the more sensitive industries, you have reporting that you have to provide, sometimes 72 hours, sometimes 96, depends on where you are, but it still have to go out. And one of the things that you don't want is saying specifically, Steve said that we should do that. That's not always the ideal thing.
Yeah.
So getting your legal involved, you want to make sure that you have out-of-band communication. What I mean by that is that please don't rely on WhatsApp or Signal. That's not the way to go, right? So make sure that you thought about those ahead of time. And then also make sure that your disaster recovery solution is not dependent on the system that you're trying to recover.
Yes.
It might sound silly and obvious, but as an example, if you need to log in to your data recovery solution by using Active Directory credentials, which is very common. When Active Directory goes away, you cannot access that anymore. So what's your plan? How do you plan to deal with those type of scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, we dealt with this a lot with early backups, but when backups were really the big push, because of ransomware, like you said, that first wave of ransomware, just can you restore this? And I saw any number of companies who couldn't even get the keys to their backups without being able to access this very system that's going to be encrypted. And so, yeah, you might want to test all that, and with the assumption you can't get into the main system. And as the cloud has started to manage that globally, if that's what got ransomware, you're going to have a really, really bad problem.
No, it's like going back to your previous point, right? That I think was a great one, where you said, "Oh, I'm just called Steve, and Steve just going to click something and it will be recovered." No. Have Steve actually try to do it.
Absolutely.
And have him try to do it when some of the systems are not available to him, and see what happens. What if my storage goes away? Do I have a dependency? What if my networking goes away?
Yeah.
Do I have a dependency? How do I recover if the machines are currently unavailable and need to switch somewhere else? Those things and also a big takeaway, it's much easier to do things on paper. But unfortunately, that's not what's going to happen in reality.
I mean, I remember doing EMA stuff and just saying, okay, your cell phones don't work.
Right.
And they were like, oh, and they had a plan. They had these 800 megahertz radios they were always talking about. I was like, okay, get them out. And they were like, what? I was like, no, get them out. Let's do it. Like, get me an 800 megahertz radio. And they went and got them. They have batteries for them. Half of them didn't work. They've been laying on a shelf somewhere for 25 years. And, they're like, so yeah, this isn't the best solution. And they had to work on that. So I think that's some great points from you. I wish I had longer to talk to you. I got a lot more questions. But thank you, Mickey Bresnan, for joining us today. To find out more about Sympuris, please visit securityweekly.com/SympurisBH. And for all our Black Hat 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/Black-Hat. Thanks again, Mickey, for the conversation. Stick around. We'll be right back after the break with even more interviews live from Black Hat 2025 here in sunny Las Vegas.
Welcome to Black Hat 2025. It's day 2. We're here live recording from the CyberRisk TV studio at Mandalay Bay here in Las Vegas, Nevada. Still a little smoky outside, but it's getting a little better. I'm your host, Matt Alderman, and joining me for this interview is JJ Guy, CEO and co-founder at Sevco Security. Welcome, JJ.
Thanks, Matt. It's good to see you.
I've been looking forward to this interview. As I said a little bit, I have a lot of experience in the vulnerability space and this whole concept of CTEM. It's one of these areas that we've kind of failed at as an industry for about, 20, 25 years, something like that. And so to see this becoming a very interesting topic again is kind of exciting, because I think the primary 3 vulnerability vendors have kind of failed at this a little bit. What made you want to go down this path? Because it's been this, like I said, a 20-year evolution.
Yeah, so we didn't start here. Yeah, the Sevco started with what we now call CASM, Cyber Asset Attack Surface Management. And when that was first labeled back in 21 or so, it was separate and independent of anything vulnerability management. And at least our take on it was inventory of all your devices and assets, largely so that you could make sure that your key controls to manage your entire security program, your entire IT program, are actually in place. This was a frustration of mine from Carbon Black. I was a Carbon Black guy. And trust me, I got lots of feedback from our clients on the occasions in which the endpoint agent was missing from one of the devices in a key at a key time. And we got a lot of questions and asks on how to better manage endpoint agent deployments. And as we had the opportunity to get a new startup up and going, I picked that problem to solve.
Well, CIS Control 1 and 2 know your inventory, right? We're all horrible at it. So not a bad place to start, by the way.
Yeah, and it's like this, we've always said the CMDB is supposed to be that control. Like, how many of us have signed off on the audit record and given our audits saying, yep, we got that inventory. Meanwhile, in the back of your head, you know that it's not quite as clean as you're presenting to the auditor. But what's happened over the years since then, and with CTEM, is chasm and vulnerability management are starting to converge.
Yeah.
Because we've recognized that the quality of any vulnerability assessment program is limited by your ability to make sure that you've got visibility in vulnerability assessment, like your whatever tool you're using to scan is actually covering that device.
Yeah.
And then more importantly, that like whatever tool you're managing to patch those devices is actually on that device.
Yeah.
I mean, the foundation of everything, CI's control number 1 and 2 is that inventory.
Right.
So it provides that foundational data fabric,
Yep.
if you will, upon which you can layer all the rest of your vulnerabilities.
Which is one of the key areas that a lot of the vulnerability management vendors have not been able to solve for, which is the broader asset management problem. They have a lot of asset data, right? Because they're out scanning or they have agents running, but where are the unknowns, right? Where are the assets that I don't know anything about? And that was part of the context problem that has been kind of elusive in that space for a while. One of them started to go down that path a little bit and did some really interesting work there. I'm not going to go into names, but it hasn't been solved holistically. So you guys start with inventory. Once you have inventory, you can pivot a few different places, right? You can go to configuration, which is a very big component. It's kind of near and dear to my heart, having spent a lot of time on the compliance and GRC side and also building some policy compliance stuff. So you can go that direction pretty quickly. You also went to the vulnerability side. How are you pulling all this together? Because I think what's interesting for people to understand is how do you understand the overall kind of posture of an asset? Because it's not just vulnerability data. It is a combination of vuln and configuration data, et cetera, right?
And business context.
Yes.
The users that are on that device.
Yeah.
And use it on a day-to-day basis. Applications that are like the list of the potential business context that goes into assessing the risk on any one platform and thereby helps you prioritize your vulnerabilities is significant.
Yeah.
With like everything we do in vulnerability management today and like the core tech that all the existing platforms are built around is a network scanner.
Yes.
Which was great back in like 99 and 2000 when because when those companies were first established and the technology was built, because like the cloud didn't exist, mobile devices didn't exist.
Right.
Keep going down the list.
Yeah.
But the world changed significantly since then.
Yeah.
And our tool chains for vulnerability assessment didn't keep up. And like I don't fault any of the existing vendors for failing to keep up, because it's been a very dynamic space.
Yeah.
But what started to happen is like those platforms used to be horizontally integrated. You would buy the one product that was your vulnerability assessment product. You would scan your network and use it everywhere.
Yeah.
But what's happened as our networks have gotten significantly more complex, we've got more devices in more places. And you've got these different vertically integrated vulnerability assessment tools. You've got 3 different ones for core CVE assessment, depending on whether they're in cloud, on-prem, Linux or Windows. Yeah. And then you've got the different kinds of attack surfaces that each have their own kind of problems.
Right.
And the poor vulnerability analyst is still trying to run a process back from the day when he had one single platform.
Yeah.
And the situation is untenable.
Yeah, untenable. It actually gets a little broader, because now we bring in application vulnerabilities, because it's not just the device anymore. Now I got a bunch of third-party applications running on there. Those have vulnerabilities. So now I got to look at software composition analysis, static analysis, dynamic analysis tools, et cetera. There's a whole space on the application security side, but there's a bunch of vulnerability weakness data over there that could also influence the overall security and posture of an endpoint, which is not just a computer anymore. It could be a container running on Kubernetes or in the cloud and like the landscape has exploded, right? So in 2015, I wrote a thesis on how the cloud would change the world, and that at some point a company wouldn't need a network. They wouldn't need any endpoints. Everything would be in the cloud. We'd all connect to it from the cloud. What do you scan when you don't have a network anymore?
Yeah, so
Right?
that's the core challenge in getting an accurate device inventory. It used to be that a network scanner was sufficient because all our assets were on-prem.
They were all
enterprise
on-prem.
network.
They were behind a set of firewalls,
Right.
and
No.
I knew where they were.
And that was exactly, and they didn't move.
Yeah.
But these days, with our networks being so much more complicated, like the problem is not that nobody has an asset inventory; it's that they've got a dozen, and they all say something different. And the challenge is that every one of those uses a different kind of technology to measure inventory, and that sees a different subset of the whole. And the only way to get a complete and accurate inventory is to aggregate multiple different kinds of technologies together into one picture. Like back in my Intel days, we would have called that, the fusion of different multispectral imagery, multi-sensor imagery. It's the same basic problem.
Right.
But today we try to insist on using one particular kind of measurement,
Right.
And call it good enough,
Right.
And it's not.
So at the heart of Sevco, is it really about integrating and understanding all the asset data first from all the different repositories? You've got stuff running in Azure and AWS and GCP and on-prem and remote and mobile. And so the first problem to solve is get all that.
That's the foundation in my view of the world. The strong opinionated approach, and like we got our clients through this in the overall process. Step one is the inventory.
Yeah.
And making sure you've got a comprehensive inventory from all your sources, and that takes time. You got to iterate through it.
Yeah.
On top of that is then making sure that all your critical controls are actually deployed where they should be, no one in general today, very few organizations are actively managing agent deployments. So they're agents for vulnerability assessment, patch management,
EDRs,
security.
yeah.
You keep going down the list.
Yeah.
In general, the number of what is typical for the fire and forget kind of deployment that is typical on the IT world and the software distribution mechanism is 80%. So 20% any given endpoint agent is missing from 20% of machines that it should be installed on.
Yeah.
Now that metric, but keep going, because recognize, from the position of an attacker and understanding the kind of risk, that means on 20% of the machines, you're missing the key visibility of even having an inventory of the vulnerabilities, or being able to push patches to that machine
or knowing if it's misconfigured or whatever.
Right,
Yeah.
Depending on what capability it is. But when you go through the conditional probabilities, like the likelihood that if you've got 4 endpoint agents, that at least one of those is missing from a box, now becomes 30%. And you look at it from an attacker's perspective of how many different doors does he need to go shake the handle on in order to find a machine that is missing one of those critical controls, and the number is like 3. And by the time you hit 3 machines, you are going to hit one that is missing one of those critical controls. We spend all this time patching, the CVE of the day.
Right.
And meanwhile, we're totally ignoring these critical gaps. Now, that becomes phase 2. And it's just basic visibility and command and control.
Yeah.
Like you can't even begin to manage your program unless the tools you use to manage that are actually in place and fully deployed. And then on top of that, you can start to import and aggregate vulnerabilities and call it just CVEs first.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have multiple sources of CVEs.
Yeah, of course.
It's not just one.
Yeah.
They consolidate all those together, deduplicate them because there's going to be overlap in the reporting. And with a strong asset inventory, you can understand where those gaps are and not have a noisy data set that's got duplicates. But then what's so amazing is business context prioritization of those, because it's built on top of the asset inventory and there's such a strong tie between the rich data available in the assets about the device, the users, any other attribute in any one of the systems that you have configured. The quality of the business context prioritization that you're able to do in managing your list of vulnerabilities is off the charts. They are absolutely incredible and way more sophisticated and capable than like what's in NIST 800, whatever it is, like 830. Thank you. Then there's like 4 criteria, and like state of the art these days in most products is to, on a per device basis, go to the drop down and select, high, medium, and low. Who manages that at scale?
I know that. I live it in my day life. So I do want to talk about prioritization a little bit, because you start to bring the components together, right? So you think about business context, you got the inventory, you've got the vuln, the configuration data, et cetera. Where I've seen a challenge is putting that into a risk model that you can take to an executive team, not to an operational team. I think operationally, if you can prioritize vulnerabilities and give them a stack ranking list, I think that helps the operational guys tremendously to understand where they should focus patching. But I'm talking about this from an executive level. I'm thinking CFO, CEO, board. Their risk scores I've seen challenges with, in that, yes, it's my normalized score. What's an 87 versus a 92? What's it going to cost me? So I'm a big believer in risk quantification, because if I can quantify the potential risk of those devices, those assets in dollars, and then I can talk about what it's going to cost to mitigate that, now I actually have a chance of getting funding. Are you going there? Where when you think about the prioritization stuff, like, are you kind of heading that way? And how are you thinking through that? Because I think that's it's still a challenging part in the industry.
Yep. So we are blessed and cursed, because for this particular problem, we've got, I'll say, more data than anybody else.
That's not a data problem. It's a context problem. I told you that earlier.
And so we've got more context than anybody else.
That's good.
And the kind of contextualization that we can provide for any given vulnerability is absolutely incredible. I generally approach this with our clients and the executives. And in CTEM, Gartner in their framework has put scoping right up number one.
Yeah.
Of defining very carefully what's in scope for your program. And we make, as part of that, the prioritization framework.
Okay.
Let's just talk on a whiteboard. What do you care about? What are the most important vulnerabilities for you? And then the subset of devices in your network, applications in your network. What are the most important ones for you? And just have a conversation. Stay away from anything technical, mumbo jumbo, blah blah blah. And be able to express that at, say, the high altitudes that the CEOs and CFOs work with. So then there's good alignment between the security executives and the rest of the board. On strategic objectives. Once those strategic objectives are set, then it becomes a data problem. From my optic, it's our responsibility as a company to have the data first available, understand the existing systems throughout the enterprise that have got an inventory of all that various data, and then we'll aggregate it, collect it, normalize it, get it into the right spot, and then be able to have a query engine over the top of that to be able to express those strategic objectives in what ends up being effectively just a query. Once you turn that in, once you make the connecting flight between those strategic objectives of how you want to prioritize, and something technical, if there's any gap, then it becomes an engineering challenge, and very focused, very narrow, very clear and acute, and tied to the strategic objective.
Right.
Once all that...
So then the CISO's talking about whether they're meeting the strategic objective, not about the vulnerabilities and number of CVE counts and all the other stuff we get wrapped around the axle.
Right. And then once you've got, it's like any other challenge, you've got the objectives set, the clear strategic objectives, and you derive from that all the various projects. Once all that's up in place, you can have a dashboard where all the data is rolling up. You understand and have confidence in every layer of the stack, because you have a solid asset inventory. You've got all the controls in place. You manage those to whatever your threshold is, 90%, 95%. You've got all the vulnerabilities, and then the prioritization of those vulnerabilities aligned with the program's strategic objectives. We do that every day.
Awesome. Now, just one quick thing. What's next in this space?
It's going to be interesting to watch. I mean, Gartner is publishing a new Magic Quadrant on exposure assessment platforms.
Got it.
That'll be coming out in the next several weeks. So that's going to put a stake in the ground for the set of products in market today, and at least Gartner's opinion, on how they align with the objectives of the CTEM framework.
Got it.
There's a lot happening in terms of all the rest of us working with Gartner to try to get through what's right.
Yeah.
And all of this explosion that we've had over the last 15, 20 years to try to make up for the gaps in legacy VA products, and how all those fit. We've got our own path, of course. I mean, we're taking a data-first approach, bottoms up. I mean, you hear me, I'm an engineer by trade. I like to have high confidence in every brick in the wall as you build it up with a strong foundation one at a time. So we'll continue to take that approach of being proud and confident in high-quality data that we can give confidence in and continue to expand the data set to be able to provide even more contextualization and more ability to tie into a different set of considerations and those strategic objectives.
Awesome. Thank you, JJ, for joining me.
Matt, as always, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
If you want to learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/SevcoBH. For all your Black Hat viewing needs, you can visit securityweekly.com/Black Hat. Thanks again, JJ.
Thanks, Matt. It's fun.
Stay tuned. We've got more interviews live from Black Hat 2025.
Do your end users always, and I mean always, without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1password.
Welcome back to Black Hat 2025. Yeah, I'm still here. I've been here. I was even here when there were other people doing things, but I was here and I was just standing over there so you couldn't see me. But we're recording live from the CyberRisk TV studio at Mandalay Bay, not telling you where, in Las Vegas. There's a madhouse downstairs. It's totally crazy. I tried to get to the floor to get a t-shirt from ThreatLocker, but I couldn't get there. But anyway, I'm Doug White, and joining me for this interview is Jason Passwater, the CEO at Intel 471. Hi, Jason.
Hey.
Glad to have you here.
Yeah, likewise. It's good to be here.
I think Intel's one of those things that, I know about it conceptually, but I've never really worked in that space. I mean, directly. I mean, I've done stuff where people ask me to do that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about teams and how this fits into your enterprise. Mm-hmm. Because when I first started in this, the cybersecurity team, for everything from Intel to changing the toner cartridges, was me. Network security, I'm there. Programming evaluation, gotcha. Because that was just really what it was. It was not a priority. It was something where they're like, well, yeah, if you have any spare time, feel free to, to review. So how do you think that the role of cybersecurity teams is evolving now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been happening over the last 20 years where previously you could build a wall, the idea was you could build a wall around your organization and protect it like that and just block everything. The realization is you can't do that in the global business environment and be successful. You've got to have these virtual and literal entryways in and out of your business. And that obviously impacts cybersecurity. So the way it's evolved is the realization that I have to understand the external space, the space beyond the wire as well, and be intimately familiar with that as much as the internal space. So you've seen that kind of evolution happen, I would say, over the last 20 years. You'd be hard pressed if you went 15, 20 years ago to find a CISO that would probably say, yeah, I'll be negotiating with ransomware actors at some point in the next 15 years. But here we are in 2025.
20 years ago, you probably couldn't find a CISO. that's a modern concept for a lot of organizations that were just still adding those roles because they realized what you're talking about. They needed somebody, one, to guide that, and two, that a lot of times the C-suite people had no idea what any of this stuff meant, and it gets esoteric. I mean, I remember getting a call from a C-suite member asking me, "What is ransomware?" And it was a pretty big company. And I'm like, well, it's how they come in and encrypt all your hard drives. They go, okay, just start defining each word as you speak. Yeah. Because they didn't have any, and they didn't have anybody. It was a mid-sized company, but they didn't have a CISO, and they just they call networking, and they're like, I don't know, it's some stupid nonsense. Don't worry about it. We got the network up.
Look at my background. I mean, I was counterintelligence, human intelligence in the Marines. I mean, I used to track bad guys, interrogator. I've actually turned that skill set, and we've built a whole business around that. Now there's an industry around that, like tracking that external aspect of the threat and delivering that knowledge to the.
I think that's really useful. I mean, do you think some of this need? I mean, that's always cool. I mean, that was cool in 1960. You know, I mean, Intel's been something that people have been collecting since, I don't know, the Sumerian Empire was probably going, what's going on, you know, over those hills. So it's always been important to know what people are up to. And seeing, and there's always been intel for corporate. I mean, not security intel, but like, you know, what's our competitors doing? What's happening in the marketplace? But as I started seeing this being driven, it was about the spread of the internet. And you think it's about the massive availability of information and the speed with which that information arrives?
Yeah, I mean, it's this stuff is so prevalent, and the need to kind of cover down on it. You know, the bad guys are much faster than us. They can find things much quicker than us. Oftentimes, they're more innovative than us. You know, when I say us, I mean the enterprise, the companies.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, I think it's just that's why it's so pervasive.
I mean, you and I were talking before we started recording about like old time stuff, and when Carolyn Meinl published the Happy Hacker's Guide to Mostly Harmless Hacking, and there was this big outcry because she revealed things like what our login is, and you know, finger as a service, you know, and it was like supposed to be some grand revelation because that information wasn't widely available. So people that were systems level people knew these kind of things, but they didn't talk about it a lot. Yeah. So I mean, but today a 10-year-old kid with a vendetta can gather massive amounts of intel about an enterprise, about a global enterprise. Even you could be gathering intel just by yourself.
Yeah, the barrier of entry, you know, for the attacker has been lowered a lot through technology and just through the availability of information that's freely out there.
And do you think like the malware-as-a-service people are driving that too, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, in the actual, you know, that cyber criminal ecosystem, you know, they've got business models that some CEOs would, you know, take the morality and the ethical aspect away for a second. You'd be pretty impressed by, you know, the margins and the growth that they have. And it's all through, you know, a malware-as-a-service, right? Like they've created businesses around this. And that's really like 2010 was, I think, the kind of point where you really started to see this professionalization of cybercrime take shape from a business perspective.
It looks very professional. I mean, I looked at some of that for a client who asked me, like, could you just brief us on this? You know, tell us something about what this dark web thing and all this stuff is. And I was getting like eye-opening things, but I saw less moral and ethical stuff with some of these people than I expected. You know, it was more like organized crime.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you know, the mafia neighborhood is the safest neighborhood in town because, you know, people that break the rules, somebody comes and puts you in the trunk of a Cadillac. But I wasn't seeing them saying things like that. But you know, they were talking about their business model and their plan and their customer service and support. And I called one. They had they had like a WhatsApp number, and I called it, and I was asking, like, well, you know, we're thinking about getting involved with you, and I'm just treating it like a client, you know, and the guy and the customer service was awesome.
Yeah.
They were helpful. I didn't get a robot. I was thinking about this when I was on like talking to an airline recently, and I was like, you guys should like go model your customer service after these bad guys because theirs worked really well, and they got me straight away to the person I needed to talk to without a bunch of nonsense.
I mean, they're in the business of making money, right? For the most part, you know, cyber espionage aside, they're in the business of making money, and you know, and that's what we do. We track that model, and then help our customers understand how it works.
Okay. So I guess one of the questions I had for you then was like, what do we? I'm going to add to it, but what do we need to be doing about this? You know, in terms of an enterprise now, because I was thinking, you know, if somebody opens a port on a firewall in Singapore, and an agentic AI notices it and passes that information to another agentic AI that then passes that intel on to a bad person or a group, and they immediately start exploiting port 666. I mean, a lot of companies are going to be very intimidated by the idea that this almost butterfly wing kind of stuff is critical to their business, because that could literally be a massive exploit that results in the entire company being ransomware. It could be something where the whole place is shut down. So what do we need to be doing?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you have new technologies and new things like agentic AI, people are trying to figure out how do we leverage this, and it's a necessity because you're seeing budgets and headcount suppressed and reduced, but the need to do security and reduce risk, it's still going to be there. It's still there. So it's about understanding that before you deploy it, of course, but getting that external kind of visibility into what the bad guys are doing on a regular, ongoing basis, kind of maintaining that finger on the pulse. Like, to me, that is just the requirement, in addition to understanding the internal situation, where the agentic AI, I think, in a positive way can come into play, or just, I call it operationalization, right? So, if budgets are being suppressed, if headcounts are being reduced, but you still need to do your job, how do you do that in an efficient way? Okay, so operationalization is basically taking a piece of intel or data, conducting a course of action to satisfy a security or risk use case, right? Simply, a human can do it, or you can do it through AI or technology. Where people need to really go is say, hey, we need to integrate across the enterprise, all the different departments and systems that we're using to satisfy these use cases. I'm now delivering intel to my VP of HR, the North Korean IT workers situation, very pervasive. And she is then tweaking the hiring process, the technology they use, or educating the hiring managers so that we can detect that and make sure that we don't fall victim to that. Well, that needs to happen technically through an integration with the HR systems. Third-party vendor supplier risk mitigation. There needs to be intel integrations into your management systems that will then deliver that intel directly and then identify the threats when you have exposure. You can apply this to any use case. I mean, patch prioritization, same thing. It's about taking discrete intel, streaming it through integrations or through agentic AI to identify the issues before they become problems.
Yeah, because you could. I mean, I've seen stuff like this done in completely different realms with like pricing structures and things like that, where they were collecting intel and feeding it back to, I don't know, a sales manager, so that they had kind of a live action feed when they're trying to do sales or they're trying to talk to customers or whatever, and they got a lot of things dancing around there. But I've thought about how powerful that would be if I could pull up something that, if I had a dashboard that was telling me here's a bunch of chatter, but it's not just chatter, because yesterday I was talking to somebody and I was telling them my first job I had a stack of green bar this high that was the logs from the night before, and I was supposed to sign them saying I had reviewed them, and I was like, yeah, this is never going to happen. And I mean, if I can gel that chatter down to what matters to me and what is in my risk profile. I mean, there's obviously going to be things out there that I just say, I choose to accept this risk.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not saying you should do that, but I'm saying sometimes you have to do that.
That's a course of action.
No, it is. And sometimes it's a valid course of action.
100%.
I mean, I've seen people say this is just not a real valid threat. But sometimes they do that to, as a kind of cop-out too. So, I mean, is that where you're going with this? Is we get to a point where you're looking at some issue with like your firewall, and now all this intel comes up about here's 3 places where that was compromised and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, we just rebuilt our entire platform. So we built our business around supporting what I would consider the core of the intel market, where, the most mature teams, they know how to take the data, the information, extract the TTPs, behaviors, and whatnot.
Yeah.
But as the industry grew, you saw $30 billion companies immature in their intel journey. They want to do intel, but they don't have the resources yet. They can't command the budget, so they need to start somewhere. So when we released our platform, we really got it down to 3 modes. Exposure mode is kind of a tactical orientation of when the bad guys look at me, what do they see? What opportunities exist? Because I need to plug them now.
You bet.
And that's very use case driven. So, third-party vendor supplier risk is a module. Attack surface exposure is a module. We're going to add new modules around vulnerability patch prioritization. And then you have the intel mode, which is I need to track the threat actors directly. I need to know what they're saying, what they're talking about, so I can understand intent and behaviors. Yeah. And then you have hunt mode. Hunt mode is really the operationalization out of the box, right? So we take all the intel, we curate it and create hunt packages, or you can use the platform to manage your own hunt packages. And then the integrations with EDR, SOAR, SIMs, you can then deploy those hunts like downrange. So you abstract or take away the need to deal with all the intel directly and manually, and you're constantly just deploying these hump packages to understand how where your gaps are.
Does that kind of thing vertically integrate across like this sort of supply chain stack? I mean, you're mentioning third-party suppliers and things. So if I'm up here, I'm this big, multinational organization, but I've got thousands of vendors that are feeding me, can that kind of trickle down through that stack?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the long-term vision. When I talk about the need, so one of the needs that you're going to see, the pressures, I think, from the business is, I talk about supporting my VP of HR with that intel. You're going to see that within organizations where other functions throughout the business require intel support, and it's not scalable or efficient to do that manually.
No.
So you're going to have to plug into those third-party systems that they're using, the technologies they use to manage the hiring process. The vendor supplier management team, what systems do they use? Is it Ariba?
Yeah.
Is it,
I mean, if it was a
whatever.
CISO, that's definitely one of the things. Like I used to do consulting. It was a very, very long time ago, but it was much more along these lines, which was you've got these military bases, but they hire local vendors in, like Kaiserslautern or somewhere, and they bring, I don't know, sausages onto the airbase.
Yep.
Well, those vendors never were perceived as a threat. They're just a bunch of local guys with trucks, and they bring sausage on the airbase. Okay, that's fine. But today and later, after 9/11, there was a lot of movement towards, we need to vet these guys. We need to know who they are. And a lot of those companies just kind of folded up because it wasn't because they were doing anything bad. It was just like, if the CISO, I would really like to be seeing that threat surface, with all those vendors and going, oh, there's a problem over here with that guy.
Oh, yeah.
And that company was compromised last week and they're tied into our entire data structure and things like that.
Yeah, and oftentimes that, there'll be kind of an unwitting, threat to your organization.
Absolutely.
So they could be compromised, and the external visibility that we provide will identify that. But that organization might not be so proactive in telling their customers that, hey, we've got a major issue over here. But you basically we know about that. So that's where I think that Intel supports that third-party vendor supplier risk mitigation.
And I think that's one of the biggest threat vectors there is, right now, because, even if I'm a superhuman company and I've really locked everything down, I still have to let people in and out the door. And I don't want to, but I have to because I can't. It's not 1975 and I can't roll all my own software and everything here. Yeah. So I've got people plugging in, many people, plugging in. It's almost like it drills down to like individuals. Yeah. Just you look at your house and you go, is my oven spying on me? Guess what? It's wanting to connect to the internet every day. And I literally see it because I actually track what traffic's on my home network, and I'm like, why does that thing it's trying to ping something in China? I'm like, no, you can't. I don't care what you want to do. I'm not letting you do that. But I think we're getting there. Like even to small vendors.
Yeah, even the small vendors. And then those small vendors are playing a critical role in the business of some very large corporations. I can go back to the end of 2017. I can tell you there's a very specific Eastern European actor that we were engaged with, and he was selling access to SolarWinds. And you know what happened?
I
2020,
that story,
that came out. And he was a very sophisticated threat actor. He was doing a lot of, interesting and sophisticated stuff. Well, that's a third-party issue for a lot of people.
A lot.
So
it's a massive problem.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a very important area to be in, so I'm glad you're there.
I appreciate it.
It was great to get to talk to you. But thanks, Jason, for joining us today. If you want to find out more about Intel 471, please visit securityweekly.com/Intel471BH. For all our other Black Hat 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/Black Hat. Thanks again, Jason. And stick around because we have more content coming to you right away. So fast, the chair won't even have a chance to cool off here at Black Hat 2025.
Hello, security world. Welcome back to Black Hat 2025. We're here recording live from the Cyber Risk TV studios at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. I am Jackie McGuire. I am a day and a half into Vegas, and I have not lost any money or gotten sick yet, so we are on a roll. Joining me for this interview is HD Moore. HD is the CEO and co-founder of RunZero. Welcome, HD.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we've interviewed you on Enterprise Security Weekly before. I know my co-host Adrian's a huge fan. Is spoken very highly of you for a long time, so it's really exciting to have you here. And we are going to talk about probably one of the most important and most often bungled processes in the enterprise, which is vulnerability management. So let's start with, what is the state of vulnerability management? So let's generalize, I guess, mid-market customers, because they're usually a good poster child for what's going right and wrong. What are you seeing in terms of what's going right? All right, let's start with what's going wrong. So why are we still doing such a terrible job managing vulnerabilities?
I mean, short version is the tools haven't improved, and actually they've gotten worse for the last 20 years. So if you look at like the two core things that vulnerability management tool is supposed to do is like find all your stuff, use both authenticated and unauthenticated discoveries to identify vulnerabilities. And we've gotten really bad at the unauthenticated discovery part, and we've just kind of gone full into authenticated, agent-based, et cetera. So now what folks have is a list of vulnerabilities that are like outdated, missing patches on half of their assets and almost nothing on the other half of their assets. And so folks get this giant pile of vulnerabilities and they say, well, which one's the most important? In reality, they don't even see half of them, and then they over-rotate on the other half of them where they do have agent-based data.
Yeah. So this is, you said it's gotten worse over time. Is it a data volume problem? Is it so I wrote, it used to be just like we had a network and a firewall, and if you keep people out, you're good. And now we have remote work, we have vendors, contractors, all, everybody's growing through partnerships and technical alliances. So is it a sheer data volume problem? Is it, we were just talking before we started recording about retail therapy, we just have too many tools, or what is the issue?
It's a lot. It's that folks, generally customers can't tell the difference between a product that works and a product that doesn't. They just buy the thing that's one of the top three and say, well, obviously it must work because it's one of these three things. The reality is those tools have been getting worse over the years. I mean, if you look at like how much of the R&D goes into unauthenticated discovery versus authenticated discovery, it's gone from like 90-10 to 10-90 over the years. So almost nobody spends money on actual research anymore at the big vulnerability management companies. Instead, what happens is the analysts, everyone else are saying, you know what, instead of trying to improve your data or getting more accurate detections are commodities. Let's not worry about them. Let's just worry about filtering the stuff coming in, and then we'll show you the right ones to fix. We'll tell you what to mitigate first. Reality is you're still missing half your vulns to start with. So whatever you mitigate, you're still kind of missing in the other half of the field.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about. It's almost like if you're a bank only really looking at what the bank tellers are doing and not really worrying about what the people coming in and out of the bank are doing, which is arguably your more important people that are going to cause issues. So how do we start to address this? So what do you think is the right way to address vulnerability management? How did you go about it, founding Run Zero, and kind of what was the inflection point for you and like there's a better way to do this?
Sure thing. My background's offensive testing, right? So when you're doing an offensive test, you typically don't have a credential to start with. Like you have to kind of like get whatever data you're going to get to by hook or crook to determine what something is to break into it. And so the great thing about going that approach is that if you can identify it through an unauthenticated network path, you know it's exploitable because you found it yourself without a credential. It's not something that's like, oh, if I had an SMB credential in this machine, I can tell you that your PDF reader on your server's out of date. Like no one cares about that. Yet that's somehow the most critical vulnerability in your list of prioritized vulns, right? So our approach was let's start from bare bones. Like I'm an attacker, I want to break into your stuff. What is the low-hanging fruit? What's the easiest way to break into your thing? And secondarily, like if a new vulnerability comes out in a product that you may not have even heard about until today, how do we tell you where all those things are right this second and get them patched, even without having to run another scan or another lengthy discovery process? So those are the two things we focus on. It's like one, unauthenticated only perspective to find everything all the time, no matter what it is, whether it's OT, IoT, et cetera. And then two, if a new vulnerability comes out and move it, or the next Fortinet or next Palo Alto bug, we can tell you where all those devices are like in 2 seconds with a search query, as opposed to having to go through and wait for your next scan window, product update, rescan, et cetera. So the idea is like, end of the day, what we're trying to do is avoid customers having breaches, right? And the way to do that is to take the things that are getting exploited off the network as quickly as possible, not going through a massive list of vulnerabilities and prioritizing through ServiceNow.
Yeah. It's interesting to think, we've, in the old days, I'm so old, we would have these inventories of hardware, right? And so you knew everything that was in your network, you knew all of the things that you needed to manage. And now we have this just like sprawling, just jumble of, I have 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 different jobs, and I have Slack instances and Google instances, and they're all on my personal devices. And so to your point, like the amount of things that we are responsible for now, like when I think about like mobile device management and things like that, it seems to me that we do a really terrible job creating an inventory similar to the hardware inventories we used to keep for ephemeral assets, virtual assets, and to your point, unauthenticated assets. So starting to approach it from okay, let's figure out what exactly we have is, because it's interesting. I think I was surprised. So I spent 15 years in finance, and then I came into security as a data scientist. And I almost think that what I didn't know was what my big differentiator was, because I didn't come in with any preconceptions about what the most important things were, and I actually did exactly that. I asked my CEO, who used to be, head of offensive operations in a military branch, what are the first 4 things you would do if you broke into this system? Let's look at those things, and let's start there if you're a hacker. So as you're doing this, I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the impact of things like AI agents. So what we're seeing, or what I'm hearing, is that this is causing even more of these unauthenticated vulnerabilities and more shadow IT. So how do you at Run Zero, how do we start to address that? How do we start to figure out how to get our arms around these things that are springing up faster than we can possibly track them?
Yeah, we're starting to see a surge of new companies, like Run Zero included, that are really focused on finding the things that are exposed and exploitable, not everything else. We're not here to help you pass your CMMC compliance. We're not here to help do this. I mean, we can help with that, but our goal is to help you not get owned, and that's a very clear-cut mission, right? So the idea there is it doesn't matter whether you have great inventory here or great inventory there. What matters is what's reachable to an attacker. And so going through, a lot of folks will look at their CMDB or look at their vol management as their inventory. But again, if that's the only lens you look through, well, you don't see everything else. You don't see your HVAC, you don't see your building access control, you don't see your offsite devices. So it's just one of those challenges where you really need kind of a little bit of everything. You need the unauthenticated full-on network exposure, but then you also need the integrations to tell you about all the other things that you can't measure directly through the network. But yeah, it's definitely more of a visibility management. End of the day, especially if you're mid-market, you can't afford to buy 30 tools. You can maybe afford to buy a couple. And if those tools only tell you about half your assets, you're only going to know that you have half those assets.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you're saying is that it doesn't really do a lot of good to put a full security system and cameras in your house if your garage keypad is 1, 2, 3, 4.
And no one's going to watch the video, and it only covers the part of your building, right? So it's one of those challenges where we've really been focusing on the wrong things.
Yeah. And we usually use those things for response, not and that's all the other thing that is to your point, we have 10,000 untriaged alerts in our SIM, and we're only going to go look at some of them if something's on fire, and those alerts correspond to the thing that's on fire.
Yeah, that's the hard part. You can't just bury people in vulnerability alerts and say, go fix these millions of things. You have to say, which of those millions of things, as vendors, we need to be more responsible for what work we put onto the customers. Yeah. So our entire goal at Run Zero is we don't want to give you a million vulnerabilities. We want to give you maybe 3 findings. And those 3 findings should be things you should probably care about right this second. And if you don't agree with us, we'll show you all the reasons why we think you should agree with us. But at the end of the day, we want to give you a short list of things that actually will prevent a breach, not a giant laundry list of things that you can do better.
Yeah. So you're a CEO. And I think one of the things that I've been focused on for the last year is how we enable CISOs to be better C-level executives, in that how do we enable them to understand how to tie what they're doing to revenue, how to tie what they're doing to cost savings, and how to message the very important work they're doing and the resources they need to their executive team. So if I'm a CISO and I'm okay, yes, we probably need Run Zero because I know that we're not doing vulnerability management well. How would you explain to a CEO, they're in 5th grade, what vulnerability management is and how the way Run Zero manages it is different and why that's important? I guess from a much higher level, because this is a CEO doesn't know what vulnerability management is, right?
Yeah. A quick question, you spent $4 million in tools, you still got breached last week, and you got breached through one of your security appliances by a security vendor. So what does it tell you about the world? It means you're not buying, the security appliances are not by security companies anymore. They're by computer companies who sell you a security product. But if you look at the mandate report for 2024, the top 4 initial access vectors were all security vendor appliances. It was Palo Alto, Fortinet, Avanti. Those are the most common ways into an environment. And so if you're putting all your money into buying one of those systems, you're not really stopping the breach, you're actually enabling the breaches in those cases. So you need to kind of take a step backward and say, what are people actually breaking into? How are they actually getting into the environment? And spending ungodly amounts of money throwing inventory into ServiceNow is not going to get you there. What's going to get you there is keeping a very clear eye on where your exposures are and what things are actually being exploited.
Yeah. So I guess the higher level message is we can only manage so much in a day and we can never really do everything. So this is going to help us figure out what the most important things to do are, because we know that technology is advancing faster than our security teams can keep up. And unfortunately, we just can't double our security team. So we need to start prioritizing the most important risks, right?
Yeah, and these are not like made up risks. These are risks where we see the exploitation happening with hours, minutes, days, or even weeks before the vulnerability is known to everybody, right?
Yeah.
If you look at like one of the big Cisco vulnerabilities for the iOS XE vulnerability a couple years ago, 140,000 devices were compromised and backdoored by the time the vendor even told people about it, and then there's still no patch for a month.
Yeah.
And so we're in a situation where we're typically starting weeks behind the attackers when we first learned about it, let alone, you can't throw that into your queue and say, well, we'll do that next month during our maintenance window. You're not going to get there.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned like some of the big breaches, like Move It and things like that. And I think there's an inherent trust with some of these tools. And I think one of the things we've seen over the last several years is that attackers are now focusing on weaponizing that trust. And so like I'm talking to Cloudflare tomorrow. I think about this crazy where people were using like the link wrapping services to wrap malware and things like that by compromising accounts. And so what have you seen? So from a customer outcome standpoint, how does this change how your security teams are able to interact with their enterprises and the outcomes that they're able to achieve?
Yeah, sure thing. I mean, the starting version is we go into an organization and we say, here's the other half of your assets you didn't know about. And the IT team didn't know about it, the networking team didn't know about it, built-in control, no one had any idea these things were there in the first place. They go, crap, well, this kind of upends our entire program. Like, we don't have any resources on these things. We don't have anyone managing these things. What do we even do?
And what types of assets are those usually? What are the most common unmanaged ones you find?
It's typically everything it's either a vendor provided appliance, whether physical or virtual. Because the second you get a virtual appliance from a vendor, it just starts rotting away. Like, the OS starts going out of date, the dependencies start getting out of date. And unless you're updating your virtual appliances daily, which no one does, and the vendors don't even push updates for them that quickly, they're just slowly getting more vulnerable every day, like any other appliance out there, right? Except for you don't have access to it. You can't control it. You can't log into it. You don't have visibility into it. So all the systems out there between the IoT, the hardware devices, the network appliances, your PAN routers, all that stuff, that's all stuff you have very little insight into the appliance. A really interesting example of that is SonicWall. So SonicWall appliances are very popular, yet there is no authenticated scanner plugin for any legacy vuln scanner for SonicWall. There's literally nothing you can do to determine whether a patch is installed in SonicWall besides looking for the actual exploitable vulnerability, and most vendors don't do that.
Yeah.
And so unless you're using one of 2 of I think 7 products right now only detect SonicWall vulnerabilities and the rest don't. And so if you're not using one of those products that happens to be doing a check for that specific vulnerability, like, you're not going to know your SonicWall is remotely exploitable.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a really strange world now where we have the haves and have-nots of visibility.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that's crazy to me is that a lot of times companies end up getting breached through, they get data exfiltrated they didn't even know they were sitting on because they don't have visibility. There's no observability. And I think I always talk about how we went through this kind of venture capital and private equity fueled proprietary data boom where they didn't want to invest in anybody that didn't have defensible IP. And defensible IP means you're just going to write a new data schema so that you can patent it, right? And so we ended up with this crazy just mosaic of crappy security tools with data formats that don't talk to each other. And I've seen that as millennials are coming so by the end of the decade, millennials will actually have more money to spend than anybody else in the enterprise. And they don't do that. They want collaboration. They won't deal with proprietary data formats. So I like to think that things are going to get better. What do you have going on at Black Hat? How can people find you? What are you looking forward to?
Sure, tons. It's been fun. So I was on a panel earlier yesterday talking about startup funding and how you bootstrap. As we bootstrap for the first few years, then raise money. So we got to see kind of both sides of the coin a little bit. 2 days ago, we gave a talk at B-Sides about kind of my favorite pen test tricks, like how you break into stuff and things that are just ways that are really difficult to protect against. Yeah. And all my favorite toys, like weird DNS hacks, things like that to get into stuff. And then on Saturday, I'm giving a talk at the TDI Village, Dyna Initiative Village, talk about building communities with Nicole, the chairman of the board over there. We're doing a talk there. And then another session on SSH vulnerabilities from some of our recent research. That'll be on the afternoon of DEF CON on Saturday.
Awesome.
So a lot of work, a lot of fun. I have about 130,000 shells sitting in a giant text file at home. I need to go figure out which of those go to which vulnerabilities. And just managing all the 0 days is the hard part of this job.
Yeah. Wow. I love that you're a co-founder and you're still like, I've got this data to go through. And I actually just shout out again the Diana Initiative. I went to their neurodivergent dinner on Monday night. They do phenomenal work. So I'm really happy to hear that you're supporting that as well.
I mean, they're fantastic. So Nicole and I have been chatting about how do you build a community? How do you get rid of trolls? How do you make sure it lives beyond you? Like all that stuff. And my experience with the Metasploit community, her experience with Diana Initiative has been a really great kind of collaborative talk. And
I should have mentioned that you helped build Metasploit.
That's my background. So doing that for 15 years.
HD is the Metasploit guy.
So it's nice not doing that now, but it's also a lot of experience building communities around that. And a lot of the parallels between open source communities also apply to, things like the Dyna Initiative, like big community organizations where you really want to have a mission-based outcome.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about security. Well, HD, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure we'll have you on again. Again, we're big fans of Run Zero.
Appreciate it.
Thank you guys joining our. You know what? It is a long morning, and I think my coffee's wearing off. To find out more about Run Zero, please visit us at securityweekly.com/RunZeroBH. And for the rest of our coverage from Black Hat, both live and streaming, you can from the CyberRisk TV studios, you can visit us at securityweekly.com/Black Hat. Thanks again, HD, for joining us. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few minutes with more live coverage. Thanks, everybody. Welcome back to Black Hat 2025. We're live recording from the CyberRisk TV studios at the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm your host, Jackie McGuire, and joining me is Jawahar Sivasnankaran. I imagine it's just as difficult for you to pronounce as when I go to Asia and they try to pronounce McGuire, but he's president at Cyware. Jawa, thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Jackie.
Yeah, thanks. We are going to talk about a whole bunch of things today, but I thought it would be cool to start with can you tell us a little bit about your background? Because I always am fascinated by, we all come into security from very different areas. So tell us a little bit about your background and then kind of what led you to Cyware and what's interesting right now.
Yeah. So thanks for having me, first of all. Super excited to have this chat. I've been in the cybersecurity industry for almost close to 3 decades, 27, 28 years now. Started in the 90s as a practitioner, then did engineering products, built products in the 2000s. Then moved into go-to-market leadership roles, customer success, sales, pre-sales, channel sales, marketing.
So you're technical, but you also like people.
Correct, absolutely. And I also like money, right? So that's part of this as well. So,
girl, same.
Yeah, there you go, right? So super excited to be part of Cyware, bringing all of that experience. I joined Cyware almost close to a year now, 8-9 months now. I joined as a president, running all of the go-to-market functions. What led me to Cyware is the focus on cyber threat intelligence, because what I've seen over the course of the last 25 plus years in the industry is we chase the wrong things as an industry.
No.
We do. And for me, cyber threat intelligence is one area where there should be a lot more focus across the industry. The good news is we're seeing that just in terms of our interaction with customers, the wins we're having in the market, the innovation that we're bringing to the market. So super excited to be part of Cyware.
Yeah, that's awesome. So in cyber threat intelligence, I think is one of the areas, I agree, we don't spend enough time. And quite frankly, most of the really cool people in security I like to hang out with are doing something in and around cyber threat intelligence. So what's the state of that market right now? Like because we're having to really rapidly evolve to keep up with the rate of change within security and all of the associated areas. So what is the current state of cyber threat intelligence? What are we doing well and what are we not doing well?
What we're clearly seeing the market going is a unified strategy around cyber threat intelligence. What used to be, there was a feed part of it, Intel feed. Then you got a TIP platform, a threat intelligence platform. Then you got other pieces that made up the full story. That was then, I would say, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. That was the case.
And they're all spitting out alerts. And your SIM is just like brrrr.
Exactly. And you got analysts, either you're a SOC analyst or maybe you're a CTI analyst that's focused on CTI, and you're just bombarded with alerts coming in. And the alert fatigue is absolutely real. So part of this is how do we come up with a unified threat intelligence management approach, and which is really where we're going. Yeah. And we've taken some good steps towards that already this year. So earlier this year in February, we took our platform, integrated that with the market-leading threat intelligence feed. So great check for us. So if somebody is coming in, I want a feed plus a threat intelligence platform, unify that, we got that done. Then we introduced a couple of months after that in April, compromised credential management. That's integrated into the CTI fabric itself.
So basically like a have I been pwned on steroids, right?
Correct. And then last week, we've gotten some new innovation into the platform itself, and that includes domain sightings. Now we're talking about dark web, domain monitoring, all of those things getting integrated in. Sandboxing, malware detonation. It's not new. It's been around for a long time. But how about integrating that into the core
That's not
CTI
usually something I
program.
see security teams doing really well. Like, and I was just talking about sandboxing with a very large company CISO, and I was like, why don't you just make it easier for your employees to sandbox and create more secure sandboxes if they're gonna FAFO with AI?
Yeah. The problem with that is sandboxing, it has always been an island of itself, right? Where it's seen like, hey, I got to take my malware sample, put it in a cloud, detonate it. Look at, that's the process that has not changed much. I think the key is integrate that with your cyber threat intelligence program and what you have, and that's the unified approach that we're driving.
So you're testing the right things in the right places more efficiently?
Correct.
All right, so we're going to have to talk about AI because, and I really think a year ago at Black Hat, most security people were like, I'm sick of hearing about AI. Like, that's never going to be in security. Like, and it was like, just put policies in place to block everything, right? Now, 180, right? It's like now security is like, okay, we realize that this is a thing. It's here to stay. And now we need to start working better with our internal customers in the enterprise to secure the things that they're trying to do. So as we're seeing this kind of rush to adapt agentic AI and all of the new AI solutions that security tools are rolling out, like, what do you think, what's your take on where it's okay to introduce AI and automation and agents, and where you really, really still need a human there to kind of have at least a hand on the wheel?
Yeah. Agentic AI is real as we as an industry, as we march towards this notion of autonomous SOC. So agents are going to play a very, very critical role. And I can tell that for sure in the cyber threat intelligence space. So what we've done is we've automated things. We've been automating things for the last 30 years in the market. We had bull scripts. If you go back 25 years, I've written bull scripts myself, right? Where you go tell a tool to go do a specific task. That's automation.
Loops
Correct. That's automation, right? In terms of you go, hey, I've got this script, go run this, right? But where we are seeing that shift with agentic AI is you want to look at outcomes that you want to achieve, right? Hey, rather than telling a tool to go run a script, how about telling your entire system to go contain a phishing attempt that is in, right? So now you're talking about multiple agents kicking in and doing the thing that they're supposed to do. And that is very much true in the CTI space. So if you look at CTI and where we are going with our quarterback AI strategy is automating a lot of things that would require a human in the loop. That could be parsing threat intelligence information, enrichment of that threat intelligence information, contextualization, right, which is super, super important. You get an IOC, what do you do with that without the right context to apply? And AI and an agentic AI or multi-agent fabric-based AI approach, driving that and eventually leading to better outcomes, because what we want to do is we want to automate some of the actioning pieces as well. But you have to do some of these front-end parts the right way so that you're not automating bad stuff that actually sets you back with your overall AI journey.
And I think the piece of so I will say, I'm a fan of agentic AI, if for nothing else than I spent months ranting against LLMs. One, because their training data is absolute trash because it's mostly Western internet, which is absolute trash. And two, they're expensive, they're inefficient. They are arguably, for probabilistic and deterministic things, they're the least efficient thing to use. So I was actually really happy when Agentic started to kind of outpace just plain LLMs in terms of how people were using them, because I think that you can make them very prescriptive, you can contain them significantly better. One of the things that still concerns me, though, is now we've gone from, all right, let's automate context and gathering telemetry, to we're like, okay, now let's automate remediation. Let's actually take steps. So what do you need in place in terms of guardrails and things like that to turn all of this, this threat intelligence and all of the context into something you can do something about without automating a disaster? Because patching, of these things are really, really hairy anyway, right? Like, we've seen people take down entire cloud networks with a bad patch. So, do you have as much stress about this as I do? Because it's one of the things I think about at night.
You've lived through as well, the IDS to IPS transition that happened in the early 2000s from intrusion detection to intrusion prevention, right? IDS is dead, long live IPS, and the whole point is automating the response itself. So coming to agentic AI and specific to CTI, cyber threat intelligence, the remediation part is going to be absolutely key, because that's where you're going to get the economic benefits as well as the efficiencies and the efficacy that you can drive.
They keep your CEO writing checks.
With an autonomous SOC model, right? But part of that is, as you move from, let's say, parsing, enrichment, contextualization, summarization, that's all threat intelligence data. But now you're taking action. A good example would be, hey, you're invoking playbooks automatically through an agent that can go invoke the right playbook. That could be the first step. Then you're automating the coding process itself of building a new playbook. If you look at it, hey, you don't want to jump into building a playbook, automating that right away, without actually going through the first step of, you got to set up playbooks that's pre-written, but now your agentic AI or multi-agent fabric, it takes the decision to go invoke the right agent. Once you got a good experience with that, then you go low code, no code, and the Cyber Orchestrate platform exactly does that. Now you can go automatically create playbooks, newer playbooks, to take action based on what you've seen in the front end of the CTI lifecycle.
Yeah. This is great in theory, but in order for this to work, I think model context protocol is the one of the kind of key things that we need, because one of the real issues I think with agentic AI and all of the different is that we had all these different companies spring up kind of simultaneously, offering kind of similar capabilities, but no real framework for how these things should talk to each other, what types of data you should expect, what types of responses you should expect. So MCP seems to be kind of stepping up to fill that void. And I know Cyware just decided has its own MCP. So can you tell us about your MCP server and kind of what role you think model context protocol is going to play in AI and security?
Yeah, hot off the press this week. Today's Thursday, Tuesday.
Yeah.
We officially announced our open source MCP server, so that a SOC analyst, CTI analyst that's working on an LLM platform can interact with the cyber products, right? Starting with our CTIX, which is our threat intel exchange platform, and Cyber Orchestrate, which is our orchestration platform. Works with Cursor, works with cloud. We also anticipate supporting other LLMs as well in the near future, but absolutely MCP is the way to go, and we've open sourced it. It's available on GitHub as of Tuesday, as of day before, and we will be working towards standardization. And one of the things that we're super proud of what we've done, Cyber, is we standardize sticks and taxi. It's been around in the market for a long time. And one of the things, I'm relatively new, but the team has built is put down the hammer and said, hey, we want to make sure that sticks and taxi is the way we're going to build our products, our architecture, the way we're going to go to market. So we have that rich history built to support an ecosystem standards-based approach. And we will continue to work on that as we look at agentic AI.
I think it's a perfect time to be playing around in open source. And so it's really interesting to me, the kind of waves of innovation, and that most things on the internet were open sourced through the 90s. And then you had this massive venture capital and private equity boom through the .com boom, where they really only wanted to invest in defensible IP, which really meant stuff that doesn't talk to other stuff, right? Because the best way to have defensible IP is to have a proprietary data format. And now we're kind of switching back to, with millennials coming into power in the enterprise, they really prefer collaboration and won't tolerate these proprietary formats and things like that. So I think it's really interesting to see how an AI is pushing us to adopt more, share more information, establish more standards, establish more collaboration between vendors. So it's great to see Cyware kind of leading the way with this open source MCP server, because I really think in the next couple years, that's where a majority of companies who have maybe historically not played nicely with other people, that's where they're going to have to go if they want to be able to maintain market share and customer share, because their customers are going to be looking for that collaborative kind of attitude.
Absolutely. I think the key differentiation is open source versus standards approach, right? Both are equally important. And where Cyber we thrive and we're super proud of is driving that standards. And we have
open source where everybody's got the same rule book, right?
Exactly. The standard space is super important. So we have our Collaborate platform through which we drive collective defense. A good chunk of that platform uses with ISACs. So we work with pretty much all of the major ISACs, and they're our customers, they're our partners. That's another thing that we're super proud of. And then speaking of standards, we drive taxi-based thread sharing, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to push APIs. We don't want to push bulk updates. Those things can be done if there is a true exception. But when it comes to thread sharing, we drive taxi as a standard. So we're truly proud of that, and we want to continue to drive that in the Agentic AI world.
And maybe just to finish up, I think since you're a practitioner and you've spent so long in, kind of deep in the trenches, if I'm a CISO and I don't have a 7-figure budget and I'm really resource constrained, where do I start? How do I start leveraging threat intelligence in a efficient way?
Yeah. You don't need a 7-figure budget to get started. Obviously, if you're big, there's definitely a need for that. The first thing I would say is take a unified approach. This is 2025. The 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago, you had a threat intel feed, maybe an open source feed, maybe a commercial feed, maybe some advisories that you got, and you tried to see all of them as different islands. First thing is take a unified approach. Look at your CTI program as this life cycle that you're managing across all of these, not just tools, but also your processes so that you're getting a better outcome. The second one is look for standards-based approach, right? Take Staxi that we talk, right? And something that you can bank on so that there's integrations that you can do with other tools, because you're not going to get one vendor that can do it all.
Right.
And even if you have a CTI vendor, a lead CTI vendor like Cyber, we still do 400 integrations with firewall players, with SIM players, with all of those others, right? Yeah. So make sure you're looking for somebody that's doing that.
That plays nicely with others.
Exactly. So that's the second part. And then the third one is look for quick wins, I would say, right? Especially as you're looking at Agentic AI. So you've got human in the loop, right? And as you're transforming that, right, you got AI in the loop, that's where you're starting. Then you got human in the loop. And then as you move towards more of the Agentic full-on SOC, right? As you're driving it, autonomous SOC with Agentic AI takes over more of the actions, especially the repetitive tasks, right? It's not automation. We're truly talking about an Agentic AI approach here, and take that as a phased approach. So those are the things I would say, right? Take a comprehensive view of your CTI program, look for standards-based approach, and then leverage AI and look for those small wins as you scale yourself. And then in 18, 24 months, you look back, you'd have gained a lot of momentum and progress.
Awesome. That's great advice. Joa, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure we could have gone quite a bit longer. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but where can everybody find you? You have a booth, I assume, in the hall?
We do have a booth in the hall. We do have a capture the flag exercise as well, a challenge that people can take and win a challenge coin, a medal, some exciting stuff happening in the booth. Please visit us. We're here all day. And go to cyber.com, and my information should be available as well. If there's anything that we can help with CTI, we're here.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Appreciate it.
All right. Stay tuned. If you'd like to learn more about Cyware, please visit securityweekly.com/CywareBH. And for the rest of our 2025 Black Hat coverage, you can visit securityweekly.com/Black Hat. We are going to be back live with great interviews and a bunch of new guests, so please stay tuned. I'm Jackie McGuire. We'll be right back from the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, Nevada for Black Hat 2025.